Did you say that you were promoting your book through drag shows?
Yes.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
yes.
That's so cool.
I think we need
That
more
made
details
my
on that.
day.
Hello and welcome to Writing Our Own Story, Small Business Life with StoryForge. This is our special guest series. You might be asking yourself who's StoryForge, and by this point, hopefully you've heard of us. If not, we are a small business startup who's trying to change the publishing industry through a gamified writing platform. We pride ourselves on being open to all peoples of all walks of life. If you haven't yet, please check us out, storyforge.com. If you are a new user, please use the referral code podcast when signing up and get a free 50 quills. My name is Tim, and I will be your host today. I'm the Senior Director of Operations here at StoryForge. Joining me today is Beatrice, the Senior Director of Marketing, Sabrina, the CEO and co-founder, and a special guest today. We are joined by Sirius, the founder of Laughing Man Publishing House. Uh, Laughing Man Publishing House is a publisher specializing in horror and dark fantasy fiction. Their mission is to curate and showcase spine-chilling stories with unapologetically queer characters and themes. So, Sirius, welcome to the show. Uh, your dog, welcome to the show as well. We are glad to have both of you.
Thank you for having us, and I hope that he doesn't make too much noise. I do apologize in advance.
That is
I'm
fine.
already a fan.
We love animals here. Usually there's dogs barking, birds. Halftime, Beatrice's smoke alarm goes off because her neighbors are cooking something. It's fine. It adds to the charm.
That's very true.
So tell us about Laughing Man Publishing House. Like you have a very distinct mission. Um, so tell us how that mission came about. Like where did the idea for this come from? How did you start building it? Give us the backstory. Give us the lore.
Well, the Lord. Well, it's Laughing Man kind of came about by accident. So I have been, self-publishing and trying to break into the publishing business like since I was like 15. And, I was walking around high school, carrying like my little stack of printed books and shilling them to all my friends, which I feel like, a lot of people could relate to that. But I have always wanted to have my own publishing company. And I tried a couple times in the past to get things going, and it never really got off the ground. But when I started publishing again in 2021, I had taken a little bit of a break for a few years. And in 2021, I dropped my dark fantasy novel, Uncrowned. And it was a lot of fun. It was like a publishing experience I had never had before because we had a few like drag shows centered around like the characters and the themes at the time. And, I was doing a lot of cosplay about the characters. And, that's when I finally started meeting artists and getting like character art made and stuff like that. So I I don't know, that was like the first time that publishing had ever really been like super fun, and just like connecting with readers had been super fun
Mhm.
because for the majority of my life, I had spent a lot of time trying to connect with my readers on the other side of a screen. And so for 2021, it was like the first time really, like just, I don't know, it was a different landscape. And
2021
I,
was certainly a different time.
oh, absolutely. Like that was like just it. And, also kind of like trying to, it was just like, I guess, a rush of a lot of different things. It was, launching books or launching at least that book at the time. And then like, um, trying to figure out like, I guess like the marketing landscape, which had changed drastically since I had started publishing, back in the day when like KDP was like such a new thing, and people were like, "Oh, our ebook's gonna like devour the print publishing world and stuff like that." And I'm just like, things have changed so much. So navigating that, and then navigating like the world as it had kind of reset, and all these like um, trying to be respectful of
Hmm.
like um, like queer safe spaces that I had never been in before. Because even though I've always been queer, I didn't start like doing drag shows and interacting with the queer community until I was, well into my 20s. So it was all new to me. And I think what really brought about like Laughing Man's mission was in around the same time, like in 21, I had really become like disabled. And I had been going to cosmetology school, and it got to the point where I learned that I couldn't stand up, like to take my test. It was really weird. And since then, I've been doing my rounds with doctors, doing my rounds with medications, and I've become like I use a crutch and I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user and like stuff like that. So I started really not only, digging my hands into, the in real queer people and the queer community, but also the disabled community. And that was when I learned, like through, and I was exploring so many of these themes through my writing. That was when I really learned that, you know, people like disabled people just really do not get a fair shake in the publishing industry. And a lot of times when our stories are showcased, then it's usually some kind of like inspiration porn, for lack of a better term, or it's like, it's just it's very rare that we get to see like authentic disabled voices like speaking out for themselves rather than having somebody else writing our stories for us.
Hmm.
So that was when I decided, that I wanted to take on other voices that were not my own. Because by then I had kind of hit, found my stride. I knew what worked and knew what didn't as far as like how I wanted books to look, how I wanted the production process to go, how long things would take me. And that was when I took on my first author who was not myself. I took on MC Crane, who wrote Terminal Inferno, and it was their story about being they're non-binary, and their story was about a trans man who gets like his flights get delayed, and he ends up in a tumultuous situation with like an evil demonic priest, and he's also disabled. So,
That took a
he's
turn.
like, yeah, like it's one of my favorite, genres has been, like this religious horror because it dives into my own experience with, religious trauma and deconstructing, and as well as Southern Gothic horror, which I had recently started embracing because, my family, our roots are like Kentucky, Appalachia,
Mm.
Tennessee, like, and I had put that part of myself on the back burner for so long because I was just like, everybody thinks that country people are uneducated. And so I finally kind of allowed myself to really dig into the parts of me that I had been putting off. And now I was like, okay, so there are all these like rural Southern queer people who are getting like constantly ignored, and there are all these disabled voices who are getting like constantly ignored. And I was like, okay, we need something to kind of just bring everybody together and amplify these voices and really give everyone that I am capable of to kind of try and push them into the spotlight and let them speak with their own voice. And I know that that was like the most rambling
It's all right.
explanation. I'm so
I
sorry.
got exactly what I asked for.
It was so great.
There are a couple things I want to go back to, but Sabrina, I'm gonna put you on the spot real quick. That kind of parallels the origins of StoryForge in some ways, like looking for a way to amplify those people who, you know, don't particularly have a voice.
Yeah. Well, with StoryForge, so like, okay, let me see if I can. set it up nicely. I was having, okay, when I was in high school, uh, I wanted to adapt my favorite book, Villains by Necessity, into a comic book. So instead of just like, it's only just occurred to me that I could have just started drawing it out and like done it for a school project, and that would have been that. But it didn't occur to me then, and I fully reached out to the author for the permissions legally to start adapting her work. And I made a huge chunk of progress. I found an artist, I finished a whole script, I got a letterer, made demo pages, started querying all sorts of publishers, and was just running into wall after wall after wall. And the most frustrating thing about it was that, like, when things got denied, like I usually didn't even get like a notice that the publisher wasn't going to pick it up. I just got like ignored for months. And it was only after a certain amount of time. Yeah, you're nodding serious. You know how it goes. Um, but yeah, I would usually just have to like guess after like half a year that like no one was going to take it. So it was around the 19th that I was just like, I have had it. I'm done. This is so stupid. It can't be this hard for everyone. Like, I feel like I always hear about like, oh, the success stories, authors that get no's and then they get yeses. Um, so I started doing more research into like, is it this hard for everyone? And I found out that not only is it that hard for everyone, it is arguably a lot harder for other people who aren't like a white cis woman. And I was like so frustrated to learn that it wasn't um like after all the difficulty, my journey wasn't even like the hardest one of the journeys. And I was like, this is dumb. We can do better. StoryForge was born. So the goal of it is ultimately to become a more accessible publishing house where anyone can have like an actual progress bar where they can see this is how far I have to go before I'm getting published. There's no waiting or rejections or anything. They'll know what their milestones are, and when they hit them, we'll be publishing.
So yeah, I think we definitely have some parallels here, and I'm gonna call an audible on the the schedule that I gave you, and I want to jump to something because Sirius, you touched on it a little bit. Um, how do you, and this is open to everyone, but how do we feel that the publishing industry treats people who don't fit their stereotypical mold? And I quite frankly fit their stereotypical mold, so I'm going to shut up and let someone else answer this question.
I mean, I haven't spoken, so I can go very quick. Um, Most of my publishing industry, like official experience I have had is on the Spanish speaking side of things, but I have seen mostly three ways that they go about it. One of them is that they completely ignore the people that don't fit the mold and just a lot of cases take the stories of the people that don't fit the mold, give them to people that do fit the mold, and then give the people that fit the mold the success. The second one is that uh people that have developed like predatory like practices and like publishing companies and stuff prey mostly on the people that don't fit the mold because they know the desperation and they know the hurt and they know the hardships and they know that there's a point like especially when you want your art to be out there that you would just do anything, right? You wouldn't read the fine print. You would just hope for the best because this is finally the only company that has given you an opportunity and then it turns out pretty bad, and I say from experience, or something that has happened to personal friends of mine. They take those people that kind of fit, but not really, and they make a deal with them. And they say, we will publish you as long as you change all of these things in your book or all of these things in your personality. So you do, in fact, fit the mold. And that has not only worked with, like, not only being with their books, but also like their life, like their presence. I have friends that have published with big publishing companies that I'm not going to say any names that they have told me personally, I can't post about these things in social media anymore because I signed with them. I can't talk about these issues anymore because of this. And they literally silence them as a condition for them to be part. of it. And obviously, there have been small cases here and there of people that have been able to break that that wall, that ceiling, but it's very hard and it's very frustrating. And I can't even imagine uh, how it is for like the English speaking industry, because in Spanish you don't have to go through agents. You go directly through the publishing house. In English, like, you go through even more layers of censorship and molding and of like that you have to go through in order to finally probably get some sort of a break, even if it's not like a big break. So yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. Sirius, what about you?
I I would say that like yeah, that a lot of that resonates. Like I can only speak for, the communities that I belong to, which are like the queer and disabled communities, but I definitely have seen a lot of that treatment paralleled, and it is massively unfortunate. Trad publishing for a lot of people with stories to tell, like, I'll just use like mine as an example. Like, when I wrote a book called Blackjack and Moonshine, and it was about a Southern queer man or a Southern queer trans man who was making a deal with the devil for his transition. And it not only had all these themes about being queer and then being disabled, but also it was very spicy, which not all of my works are, but that one certainly was. And I just knew, like, as soon as I wrote it, I knew that trad publishing was not the avenue that was going to go that that was going to go down. And I've found that, sometimes indie publishers can be just as bad, but in different ways. Because some indie publishers in some circles, you do get that lack of communication that is so frustrating. Like it can take so long, months, years to hear back. And then, they ask for exclusivity. So they want you to only submit to their house and nowhere else. So you got your story sitting on the back burner for like this indeterminate amount of time. And meanwhile, you could be writing more books and you could be, connecting with readers, but instead you're kind of in this limbo. And, you know, publishing is a long game. Publishing is a waiting game in a lot of ways, but when it's like step one is like the longest part, that's incredibly frustrating, and that's a huge barrier to overcome. And I have found that even if you manage to get past that, a lot of smaller publishers tend to form cliques. So it's like if you fit in, or you might not always fit in with the people who are publishing what you're writing. So there are a lot of well, not a lot, there are several queer publishers out there, and they, may be like they're incredibly like femme driven, which I love pink horror. I love like um femme run presses and things like that. But I have found that they can be a little bit maybe unintentionally tone deaf, for lack of a better term, when it comes to their inclusivity. They'll be like, we're opening this up to women and non-binary people. And I'm like, well, that automatically kind of lumps non-binary people in with women, and not all non-binary people want to be there. I mean, not all non-binary people are AFAB, and not all non-binary people are femme presenting, and it's just odd. So it's like, you don't, it's so hard to just find a little niche where you fit. So trad publishing doesn't want you like on principle of what they usually publish, and then indie publishing, they, may want certain things about you, but not all of you. And so you kind of have to pick and choose. So for a lot of people, self-publishing is really the only way to authentically express yourself as an author and also push out the most genuine version of your story.
Yeah. Sabrina, what do you think?
I thought it was really interesting to hear more about the small publishing side of things. Most of the research
Yeah.
that I've done has been into really big, like there's big five, big four publishing houses. And a lot of the stats and research and like numbers about inclusivity that I personally have investigated have been more about like, well, the issue is the number of people from various communities that are represented in these publishing houses. But it's interesting to me to hear that like even a publishing house that has like a representative of, well, probably just like one or a couple minorities in one, house, like the femme queer horror publishing house that you're talking about. You know, you would think that, gathering that kind of group would foster more of an inclusive mindset. And maybe it does, but it was curious to me that it's still like something you got to work at. Even when you grab a bunch of people from interesting backgrounds,
Yeah.
it's not having a group is
Yeah.
not enough. You got to still be mindful about your inclusion,
Yeah.
which I guess makes sense when I say it out loud, but
Yeah.
But it
Well,
is really, oh, I was just going to say that is really interesting because I have seen that in like online spaces and I never thought that it would happen with publishing, but it makes sense. How in some spaces the inclusivity comes with excluding other people that you shouldn't
mm,
exclude. Because I understand also how Sirius was saying, like the point, but also wouldn't you want to, if you want to be like an inclusive queer press, just say we are publishing queer artwork, like queer books from queer people about queer characters? Why do you have to define the type of queerness that you prefer, even if it's because the type of queerness that you're more close to and everything? Like, if we are already part, because I'm also part of the queer community, of a community that is having such a struggle trying to be like have its voice raised as a whole, why would you dissect that into smaller pieces just to again fit into the mold that you create? If the whole point is not fitting in any mold because everyone is different and everyone is just themselves, it's just very frustrating.
It is very frustrating. And like I think, I do see where the intent comes from. It's sometimes with like these, especially with like particular anthologies, it comes from wanting to create a space like for people who are, actively being stepped on at the moment. Like people like to express their rage about, like birth control being taken away or, stuff like that. And I think what they mean to do is they mean to say we will take anyone who's not a like a cis man. But what you end up doing is you kind of just end up like creating like a weird space that doesn't feel as welcoming as I think you intended for it to be. And speaking as like somebody who, identify as non-binary, but I'm very mask presenting and I do like testosterone and things like that. Trans men are like one of the most, at least in my corners of the writing area, I can't speak like overall, but like in my corners of the world, trans men are like so overlooked and so often like erased in queer spaces because it's like for some reason people are just not comfortable with trans men writing about like their experiences with like their AFAB bodies. Like I have often been criticized for, just by like reviewers in general for not writing trans men the way they think they should be written, not writing them quote authentically. Um,
are
and I'm
are
sitting here
those
like
reviewers trans men?
I was gonna
sometimes
say,
Okay.
how would they? Oh, because okay, but still, authenticity is different for every person. That's the point.
yeah.
Ah.
It's true. It's different for everybody, and I definitely do not think anybody should be policing how someone writes for their own experience, like especially, and it gets very frustrating. that's why I loved when I first read Terminal Inferno when MC brought it to me. Like they had a whole scene where, like their character's uterus gets ripped, like the trans male's character uterus gets ripped out. I'm so sorry if that's too graphic.
No, but it's great.
You're
I
good.
love horror. I've been fangirling all this time. It's my absolute favorite like genre. So you see me making faces, but this is me enjoying the idea of reading that book.
I'm so glad. Because yeah, like like moments like that, I was like, yeah, this is gold. You know what I mean?
It does sound like gold.
All right. So I put a pin in something earlier and I need to go back to it because I'm gonna yell at if I don't. Did you say that you were promoting your book through drag shows?
Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Ah, ah,
I think we need
that
more
made
details
my
on that.
day.
How do you
And
promote books through a drag show? Like
Ah,
I think we need
that
more
made
details
my
on that.
day.
How do
and
you promote books through a drag show? Like these are important marketing questions that we need answers for.
I love that so much.
in the past, I think like 4 or 5 years, I've been a drag king in the local community, and the person I was working with at the time, collaborating with, we had, I was releasing this, I was releasing the book, I was releasing Uncrowned, and they were like, well, let's make it into like a fantasy show. And I was like, I wasn't sure that that would work. I wasn't sure that people would go for that, but okay, I did underestimate how much people love D&D, and that's on me. But people turned out, they loved it. And so for a few years it came as part of our regular routines. So like I dressed up as like the main character. They dressed up as like their D&D OC. We had people come in as like their D&D OC, like in costume. And we, we just, I would have my book like on like a table, like at the show, and people could come and like look through it and purchase it if they wanted to. And, or we do like a raffle with it, and I would give away like a copy, like I had like the omnibus during one raffle and things like that. So and it also gave me like good like dressing up as my character, and then like filming like little things that the character was doing. That was great material to both promote the show and promote the book, so it was kind of like a 2 for 1. And I also produced another show that was based on like a horror story that, or like a horror universe that I've got going on. And so like the main character is like a clown, and so we did the Devil's Night
Hmm.
Grind show for several years, and I promoted my like circus themed book through that show. And we did like you know a lot of like, and we did drag king shows when we did that. So we did, we, of course, there were several times when, we brought in like any performer who like really wanted to be a part of the show was of course welcome. But Devil's Night Grind show specifically was a drag king show, which meant that like all of the performers, like when they brought their acts to the show, they were doing like like a masculine style of drag. So it was so much fun, and people just really ate it up. And I think that was like one of the first times I realized like how much those communities intersect. Like people love to read, they love to nerd out, they love to do D&D, and they love to go to drag shows. And just like for some reason that had never clicked, but that was a lot of fun.
All right, well, we're halfway there. We got the nerdy stuff, we got the writing, we got the D&D. We're apparently short the drag show, so we'll work on that for
We need
later
we
in
need to work
2025.
on it. We need a feature at a drag show with Sirius's books.
There we go.
I'm here for this collab.
That is a pretty cool intersection.
Yeah, I was
That's
not expecting
amazing. That
that, and
sounds
I'm
like my dreams come true.
yeah. I knew our community, if I did not go back to that, I was going to get hammered in our Discord. So
That is
I knew
very
we had to go
true.
back
That
to
is
that.
so true.
Um, so we're gonna shift gears again. That was fun. We're gonna get into like a little more serious topic here. So obviously there are a lot of challenges in the publishing industry, and if you don't, fit that mold, a little more challenging. What do you think is the number one issue that average people face in the publishing industry? If you can really create an average person, because obviously we're talking about how different everyone is and how you can't box everyone in. What do you think is the biggest challenge in trying to get published?
Funding. I think that just financing the project itself is the biggest challenge because so many, like especially like queer and disabled people, like we are like broke ass bitches. Like, and we, a lot of people who are on disability, like they can't even exceed a certain amount of income because otherwise it'll get cut off.
That's
So
messed
the
up.
chat, yeah, it's really awful, like how like disability is handled, especially in like the US. It's ridiculous. And so it's like, you know, trying to get just like, because you have to have like um the editor and the cover artist and just like budgeting for marketing itself and things like that. Like the expenses, like once you start piling them on top of each other, even if you cut back or, try to find as many budget friendly options as possible, they still like stack up to be a significant amount and or not an insignificant amount for somebody who's on a limited income or has no
Hmm.
income. So, and that's not just queer and disabled communities, obviously. Like there's like nobody has cash to burn. And I guess unless you're like part of the forming oligarchy, but like nobody, so like nobody can like just make that happen. And so it's I feel like that's where community comes in. So it's kind of twofold. It's like the two biggest hurdles are, financing and then building a solid community that is actually a supportive community that you can also participate in and give back to without just being super salesy. Does that make sense?
Yes. And
Yeah.
I think Sabrina, you'd probably second this. Like that's a lot of what StoryForge is built on is being able to get to that point of publishing for as little as you want. Like once our publishing is available, like you can get all the way there without spending a dime if you need to. We were working on our publishing path just 2 nights ago. Um, Sabrina, I'll let you take
Yeah.
it away. This is your company. Why am I talking?
Well, that's the mission. That's the goal is to make it so that publishing can be accessible even if you don't have the money to pay for like an editor, a cover artist, all this different stuff. I mean, I was doing some research recently about just how much like the low end of self-publishing is. And if you want to get something self-published and you want to do it on a budget and like cut corners, but still come back with like a quality product, you're looking at like 3,000, 3,500 on the low end, really low end, and you can keep spending. Like, I don't like self-publishing houses, especially there are a lot of ones out there that I know Beatrice specifically has experiences with kind of sketchy publishers where you can keep adding on things, but they won't necessarily do more work. But they will take your money. And you can go very high up in terms of how much you can pay for like diminishing returns. And it's kind of an awful place to be because the like good ideas and excellent stories are not like they don't only happen for people who can afford to pay for self-publishing, but most of what we do have access to ends up looking towards, skewing towards a particular demographic, even when there are a lot of really cool stories out there that like will not see the light of day just because of the situations that they're created in.
Beatrice, what about you?
And
What's the biggest challenge of getting published?
Wow. I mean, I am in the process of self-publishing right now, so that whole money situation really hit very, very close to home because it's One of my highest sources for anxiety lately, besides other things. But to say something different, I think the lack of, I don't know exactly how to put it, but kind of like the lack of like readily available information that people can use to do stuff. Like there are a lot of things, and it's really hard for me to explain it, but like it makes sense like in an abstract way in my mind. There are a lot of things that you could do that you are not aware of because like no one tells you that you can. For example, I learned very recently it is a common practice for people that are trying to like, start in the world to do exchanges. I'm a cover artist, for example. I'm a professional cover artist. It is a something that exists that you can exchange very good professional, like high quality, great cover art for good like copy editing, because maybe the copy editor is creating a book and they need a cover art and they also like they can't pay for it. There's a lot of things that you could do that could potentially help your process. Or like I didn't know the difference between alpha readers and beta readers, and it's yeah, I would have known if I had done the research. I just didn't know it existed at all. And yeah, she told us that the other day. But there's not like a kind of like a place that you go and has information or resources that you can use, things that you could learn in order to help you with the process, not only of self-publishing, but also creating stories themselves. There's a lot of guides on how to write and like books that are very biased depending on like what the author's work is or whatever, but there's not yet a place that can help you with the other stuff that has best steps to market yourself specifically as an author, things that you could do if you need to cut corners, the whole exchange kind of thing. mm, Free resources. There's a lot of authors that, again, I knew because I'm a cover artist. There's a lot of authors that are not aware that they can't use copyrighted images in their cover arts, and they try to make their own cover arts because they don't have like like the extra funds to pay for it, and they could get in legal trouble for it. And it's really hard, and it takes a lot of research that you have to basically like just scour the internet, ask very, very specific questions about as much as possible, and try to build kind of like your library of knowledge that way. But I don't think that's very easily accessible for someone that doesn't even know what they're looking for in the first place, especially someone that is just starting that journey. It feels very daunting.
Okay. So let's move into the last part of the episode here. And I realize I didn't put this in the invitation or really send it out to anyone. We always do a creativity conundrum where we talk about something related to writing, creation, whatever. And I think this is actually going to be a good pivot. Um, what's either the best piece of writing advice you've ever gotten or the best piece of advice you can give someone who is a writer?
Not you putting us in the spot like that.
I
Yeah,
I
this
Tiff.
would
can
have been
I
a
can
great one to think on before we
Whoa.
I can even
came.
start because I thought of this and
Okay,
so
you start.
in college, God knows how many years ago, I took a creative writing class and I can't remember my teacher's name and I feel really bad about it, but I'm gonna paraphrase it a little bit. She said something like um there's good writing and there's bad writing, and do you know what's worse than bad writing? And everyone was like, there's nothing worse than bad writing. And her answer was the only thing worse than bad writing is no writing. You don't know if you've done good writing or bad writing if you don't write. And the only way to find that out is to actually write it down. I'm like, oh, that's really good advice. And then I never wrote anything down. So, you know, it is what it is.
You have like the entirety of our D&D campaign. That is very heavy storytelling. So you cannot say that you
It
haven't written
is.
anything. You also have like a lore document that is basically a heavy, like high fantasy
Okay, but there was like
storytelling.
20
That's
years
true, and you put
between
that in
that story
StoryForge.
and
Exactly. And you put that in
true.
story for sure. It's also accessible. So you have written stories, mister.
But that there's also like 20 years between that story and now. So,
Still. I thought about one. It's a very simple advice that has helped me particularly. And I think the way to summarize it is that the process doesn't have to be perfect. I think as writers, especially when we start, we want to find the perfect way to do the things the right way so it will be successful. But it's usually messy. And messy for me looks, and it's something that I have learned over, like, I've been writing for more than 10 years. I'm old. Um, but
I just told you that it's been 20 years since a story in college,
shh.
Beatrice.
Uh, but not like the whole process not being perfect sometimes means that I am not writing every single chapter in order. It means that I am not outlining the entirety of the story before starting, but I outline two chapters and then I write those two chapters and then outline three chapters and then continue. Or it means that I use brackets to replace words. So if I'm writing, I'm like, and then Beatrice was sitting on her, and in brackets I put find a better word for desk, and then I continue. And editing exists, and then I'll edit later, but it's usually way better. And it's something that Sabrina said the other day, to just like edit something that already exists than try to come up with the things themselves. And kind of like to your point of like bad writing versus no writing, a lot of that I personally have like seen that that blockage is inside my head because of like perfectionism or like idea that I have to do things a certain way, and there's not a certain way. There is just do. And even more important than that is like realizing that your brain is going to work differently. I love your dog. Your brain is going to work differently from everyone else's brain. So it's fine if something doesn't work for you. Find the thing that works for you specifically for your brain, and that will be messy. And that is fine. And that's probably better than perfection, because perfection comes with too much expectations and pressure.
All right. Anyone else? I know I put you on the spot, so if you don't have anything, that's fine.
I thought of something while Beatrice was speaking, so I'll go quickly. I went to a young writers conference when I was in middle school. It was one of those big English class events, and at the writers conference, there was this guy on stage who was talking about like stakes and like making things feel more intense and get you emotionally invested. And he said that when your writing is like good, you can make a run to the grocery store for cabbages seem like the most important, most like nerve-wracking, high stakes thing in the whole world. And you can also make something, really big, like, like the Titanic sinking or something. If you don't do it well, you could make that just seem like super weak or lame. And then he was talking about how if you break down the Titanic movie just to its base parts, it's like boy and girl are on a boat. Boy and girl fall in love. Boat sinks. Like it's super dull, but it if you flesh it out, if you build around it, if you make like add the details and the symbols and all these different things, then even like I don't know, it just reframing some of the greats into like their most basic details really can make you realize that like anything can be a really good story. You just have to like re-examine how you're coming at it.
Yeah.
But it's also really fun to take the classics and just be like, yeah, if you just look at the facts, this is what happened. Take out all of the juicy details and just enjoy the random plot points.
Sirius, how about you? And then we can close out because it seems like your dog's maybe getting a little feisty.
That's his nature. Well, I don't really have much to contribute that hasn't been said about writing, but may I fling out something that may help somebody like with
Absolutely.
self-publishing? Okay. Um, Check your local art council, and they may have grants because that's how I got started.
Mm.
I applied for a grant to get my first book published. And even if you're like me, I currently live in a town that nobody knows where it is. because it's Walstenburg and it's a population of like 4 people. Even if like you don't live in like a proper town, then the nearest city to you may serve your county. So the local arts council in Greenville, North Carolina serves like 7 or more different surrounding counties in the area. So, and a lot of them have online portals now, so you can go check that out. You could call them, you could even walk in and ask them about it. But yeah, go check them out because they may offer grants to help you get your project off the ground, and that might be a good way to get a little boost, get you started.
That's amazing advice. So I think we'll close out on that. Sirius, tell people where they can find you, where they can find Laughing Man Publishing House, and anything you got coming up.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram and Threads. We are Laughing Man House Pub. You can find us on our website, which is lmhpub.com. And we currently have submissions open for our trans erotic horror anthology. So check out our website. We've got our submission guidelines on there.
All right, we'll put some links in the description. Sirius, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to talk to you. We hope we will talk to you again in the future. And to everyone else out there, thanks for listening, and we will see you at the Forge.
Bye.